She didn't know the rules of the house. She only knew she needed the job. The mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet that warned you to stay small, stay invisible. But the moment the Japanese CEO's eyes landed on her, the air shifted. He didn't see a maid. He saw a target. He pushed a strange metal puzzle across the table, the kind you'd expect in a museum, not a living room. He said no one had ever solved it. Then he laughed. Not because he thought she'd fail, but because he was sure she shouldn't even try. She didn't understand why he singled her out. She didn't understand the crowd watching her with smirks and folded arms. All she knew was that something about this challenge wasn't a game. It felt like a test she never agreed to take, with consequences she couldn't yet see. By the time she touched the puzzle, the room had already decided her worth. But they were wrong. And what happened next would expose far more than anyone expected. The only question is, why was she the one he wanted to humiliate? Before the story unfolds, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? Amina lived a quiet life, the kind that rarely drew attention. She worked long hours as a maid for wealthy families, moving from one household to another with steady discipline. Her mornings began before sunrise, when the city was still half asleep, and her evenings ended late, after she'd cleaned spaces she could never afford to live in. She wasn't bitter about it. She was focused. She had a younger brother she was raising on her own, and every paycheck mattered. Routine was her stability, and she clung to it. When she first received the offer to work at the estate of a Japanese business magnate, she saw it as a blessing. The pay was higher. The job sounded temporary. And the agency hinted that working for someone with his reputation could open doors. She didn't know much about him beyond the whispers. People said he was powerful. People said he was strict. No one said he was cruel. The mansion sat on top of a hill, spotless and intimidating. Staff moved like shadows, quiet and cautious, always watching for something she couldn't yet understand. Amina noticed the atmosphere right away. The silence felt heavy, as if everyone inside had learned to hide their discomfort. She kept her head down and did her work, grateful for the opportunity but sensing an edge she couldn't name. Her first week passed without trouble. She focused on the basics, polishing surfaces, organizing rooms, and staying out of the way. She didn't interact much with the CEO, but she could feel his presence through the staff's body language. Every footstep near his office made people straighten their backs. Every request he sent down came with tension. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like a belief that one mistake could end everything. Amina wasn't used to that kind of pressure. She was used to trust, or at least tolerance. Here, she felt as though she was being measured. As if every movement was an evaluation she hadn't prepared for. Still, she pushed through. She needed the job. Her brother needed stability. And she believed that if she worked with care, the unease would settle. It didn't. Things changed the day the CEO returned from a trip and held a small gathering for his associates. The staff whispered about it all morning. He was in a mood, they said. He had something planned. Her supervisor kept glancing her way, unsure whether to send her to the main hall or keep her out of sight. The uncertainty tugged at her nerves. Amina didn't yet know it, but the moment she stepped into that room, her life would split into a before and after. Something was waiting for her there, something the CEO believed she wasn't worthy of touching. And it was about to reveal what he truly thought of her. Amina entered the main hall with a tray in her hands, expecting nothing more than to serve drinks and slip back into the background. But the room fell quieter the moment she appeared. Conversations thinned. Eyes shifted. She felt the weight of attention settle on her, cold and unwelcoming. At first she thought she'd broken some protocol or wandered into a space she shouldn't be in, but then she saw the CEO watching her from across the room. He stood beside a long table covered in rare artifacts, each protected by glass. His guests surrounded him, waiting for his next story or display. When he noticed her, he smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. It wasn't friendly. It was calculated. Amina felt a chill run through her as he lifted something from the table and held it up for everyone to see. It was a metal puzzle, old and intricate, made of interlocking pieces that twisted in strange directions. He explained that it had belonged to a famous engineer. He said he kept it as a reminder that intelligence was rare. The guests laughed. Then he looked at Amina, still smiling that controlled smile, and invited her to step forward. She hesitated. No one else moved. Even the staff paused in place, avoiding her eyes. She felt exposed. He set the puzzle on the table as if placing bait. She knew she couldn't refuse. Not without consequences. So she placed the tray down and approached slowly, every step tightening her chest. He told the room that he had offered the puzzle to many people. Scholars, investors, engineers. None had solved it. Then he made a point of saying that he wanted to see what someone like her could do with it. The word stung. She heard the implication even if he didn't say it outright. Someone like her. Someone black. Someone who didn't belong in his world. The guests exchanged looks she couldn't decode, but the CEO's meaning was obvious. She reached for the puzzle, feeling dozens of eyes tracking her. The metal was colder than she expected. She turned it gently, trying to understand its structure, but every movement felt watched and judged. The pressure closed in. She wondered if he had chosen her because he expected her to fail publicly. Because humiliating her made him feel powerful. Because it reminded the room of that place and hers. Minutes passed. The CEO pretended to wait patiently, but his amusement grew. Some guests whispered. Others shook their heads. She heard someone mutter that this was pointless. That she should stick to cleaning. That brilliance wasn't meant for everyone. Their voices weren't loud, but the tone was sharp enough to break skin. Amina tried to steady her breath. She reminded herself why she was here. She needed the paycheck. She needed stability. This moment wasn't supposed to define her. But the more she turned the puzzle, the more she felt the room pressing in, almost willing her to fail. Her hands shook. Sweat gathered at her palms. She could feel the puzzle slipping, not just from her fingers but from her control of the moment. Then something unexpected happened. As she twisted one of the small metal joints, she heard a soft click, a sound nearly buried by the hum of the crowd. She paused. Looked closer. Another turn, another click. A pattern formed in her mind, faint but familiar, like something she had once seen but couldn't fully recall. For a moment, her nerves quieted. The puzzle didn't feel impossible. It felt like something she could understand if she trusted her instincts. Before she could push further, a thought crossed her mind. If you're hooked by this story so far, hit subscribe now so you don't miss what happens next. But before she could push further, the CEO stepped closer, pretending to inspect her progress. His tone sharpened, and he remarked to the room that she seemed out of her depth. He joked that he shouldn't expect much. The guests laughed again. The sound broke her concentration. The pattern dissolved. The pieces turned wrong. The puzzle tightened instead of loosening. The CEO leaned in, close enough that only she could hear him. His voice dropped to a quiet, cutting whisper. She didn't catch every word, but the intention was clear. He wanted her to fail. He enjoyed watching her struggle. He enjoyed reminding her of her place. Her stomach twisted. Her hands trembled again. The puzzle felt heavier. But something inside her pushed back. A spark. Not anger at first, but defiance. She didn't want to give him the satisfaction. She didn't want to leave this room carrying their laughter on her shoulders. She steadied her breath again and tightened her grip. Then, as she rotated the pieces once more, a louder click echoed through the table. The room fell silent. The CEO's smile faded. And for the first time, Amina realized that this moment was shifting into something none of them expected. What she didn't know was that the next move she made would not only shock the room but also unravel a secret the CEO never meant anyone to discover. The second click echoed through the hall like something breaking open. Amina didn't look up right away. She kept her eyes on the puzzle, her fingers steady now, guided by a calm she didn't fully understand. But the room noticed. Every voice went silent. Every smirk faded. Even the CEO stiffened. She turned the next piece, and the puzzle shifted again, unlocking a new layer. Gasps rippled across the table. The artifacts, the guests, the polished marble floor. Everything around her faded as she followed the rhythm of the pieces. It felt less like solving a challenge and more like uncovering a truth that had been waiting just for her. When the final hinge loosened, the puzzle split cleanly into 2 sections. Amina stepped back in disbelief. She expected applause, shock, or something. Instead, the CEO's expression darkened. He didn't look impressed. He looked threatened. If your heart's racing with this moment, pause for a second and hit subscribe. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before she could speak, he snatched the puzzle from her hands. His grip was tight, almost frantic. The room watched him twist the pieces apart, and something slipped from the center. Something no one expected. A folded document, sealed with a crest, fell onto the table. A guest reached for it, but the CEO barked at him to stop. His voice cracked with panic. It was the first genuine emotion he had shown all night. That fear made every staff member freeze. Amina stared at the document. She didn't know what it contained, but she knew the CEO didn't want anyone to see it. His face was pale now, the confidence drained. He blamed her. She could feel it. The humiliation he planned for her had turned back on him. And he couldn't stand it. He turned to the room and announced that she had cheated. He said the puzzle must have been tampered with. He claimed she had broken it. The accusations hit her hard, sharply, and publicly. She stood frozen as he stripped the dignity from her moment, twisting the story in real time. Some guests nodded. Others avoided her eyes. But the CEO wasn't finished. He ordered security to escort her out, insisting she had no right to be near his property. The guards approached. Heavy steps. Cold expressions. She felt the humiliation burn through her. The success she had just felt vanished under the weight of his anger. But before the guards reached her, the document on the table shifted slightly. A guest, too curious to resist, slid it toward himself and opened it before the CEO could stop him. His eyes widened. He read the first lines twice, then looked at the CEO with disbelief. One by one, others leaned in. It wasn't just a document. It was a confession, a record, evidence of illegal deals, hidden assets, and the exploitation of workers overseas. The kind of evidence that could end a career. The kind of evidence that explained why he guarded this puzzle so personally. The CEO lunged forward, but the guest stepped back. His reputation, power, and control were unraveling in seconds, right in front of the people whose respect he valued most. Amina watched it all from where she stood, still cornered by security, still shaking. The injustice wasn't gone. The danger wasn't gone. But for the first time, the CEO didn't look untouchable. He looked exposed. And as every eye in the room turned from her to him, she realized the truth. Her next decision could change everything. The only question was whether she would stay silent, or step into the moment that had just been forced open. The room shifted in a way Amina had never seen before. Moments earlier, she had been the outsider, the easy target, the one expected to bow her head and disappear. Now every guest was staring at the CEO as if they were seeing him for the first time. His anger, once a weapon, had turned into something desperate. He tried to snatch the document back, but no one moved aside. The people who usually hung on his every word now backed away from him. Security hesitated too. They no longer had clear orders. They looked at Amina, then at the CEO, unsure who needed protecting. She felt the tension ease just slightly, enough for her to step forward. Her hands still trembled, but she kept her voice steady as she insisted the document be read aloud. The guest holding it didn't argue. He cleared his throat and began reading the lines that exposed years of exploitation, hidden money trails, and the mistreatment of workers he thought no one would ever know about. It wasn't just a scandal. It was a pattern that echoed what Amina had felt the moment she walked into this mansion. A belief that people like her were tools, not humans. That dignity was disposable. That worth was defined by status, not character. The CEO's mask cracked completely when he realized he couldn't stop the truth from spreading. His guests stepped back, distancing themselves. His power, built on arrogance and intimidation, collapsed in front of everyone. Amina didn't feel triumph. She felt something quieter, deeper. Relief. Not just for herself, but for every person he had stepped on to climb higher. Authorities were called soon after. Investigations began. The staff who had lived in silence for years finally spoke up. And the puzzle, once a symbol of his superiority, became the very thing that dismantled his legacy. Amina didn't stay to watch him taken away. She stepped outside, letting the cold air settle the storm inside her. She expected to feel shaken, maybe even grateful that she had escaped something worse. But what she felt instead was clarity. She had spent years believing she had to stay small to survive. Those opportunities were meant for others. That silence was safer. But that night proved something different. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't invisible. She had value that no one could strip away. The fallout from the scandal opened doors she never imagined. Advocacy groups reached out. Journalists called. Her courage became part of a larger conversation about discrimination in elite spaces. Yet she didn't chase attention. She focused on building a future where her brother would never have to face what she had endured. A future where silence wouldn't be the default for those treated unfairly. The story spread far beyond the mansion. People debated it, shared it, and analyzed it. Some dismissed it as one isolated event. Others recognized it as another example of a truth that repeats itself too often. Racism doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it hides behind wealth and status. But its impact is just as real. Amina's journey didn't erase that reality, but it exposed it. And in exposing it, she reminded people that injustice only survives when no one challenges it. The question is whether we're willing to confront it when we see it, or keep pretending the puzzle was never meant to be solved. Guests and staff remain in the background, reflecting on what has just unfolded. Their expressions range from shock to contemplation, some whispering to one another. The mansion looms behind them, softly lit. Amina, now calm and composed, steps forward, embodying resilience and the emotional weight of justice revealed. Cinematic framing emphasizes thematic closure, human reaction, and the story's broader lesson about racial injustice.